Well, good evening, everyone. I think it's actually out of order for me to follow those young people. Weren't they great? With just amazing insights. So I'm really happy to be here, Tia, because I think that I have the opportunity to talk to some of the people who are talking to our students. And I really believe that in higher education and in K through 12 education as well, students come first. They pay our salaries. Let's not ever forget that. You would not have universities without students. Some of you are I want to know, how many people here are faculty? Great. Should be more. How many people here are under 30? Okay, y'all can put your hands down. Y'all were the ensemble. Now, if one of y'all said you were over 40, I'd say you were well preserved. So we need more students here. And I just need to say that we have these professional meetings. We need more students. We need to hear from them. We need to hear what their input is. We're sitting here talking about education, and we've heard from this talented group. But what about the student, as the sister said, who misses 4 classes and is never seen? We've come a long way, baby, since the brother at the University of Oklahoma in 1946 had to put his desk outside the classroom. University of Oklahoma Law School. But somehow white brains would have been corrupted if they let him sit inside the classroom. I'm trying to figure out how he heard anything outside the classroom. But he did get his law degree. Or my mentor, Dr. Phyllis Ann Wallace, who was the first African-American woman to get a PhD in economics from Yale University. She, when she went back to get the Cross Medal, which is Yale's highest honor, nobody recognized her. People who were in her class did not recognize her. When I said to her, now that's weird, she said no. She said it was a blessing. She said there were 2 white women in her class. One dropped out, and the other one married one of the professors. So, thus and therefore, well, she wasn't going to marry a professor. They didn't roll like that. And she was determined not to drop out. But she was the only black person in her class. And people did not recognize her years later. Or Sadie Tanner Moselle Alexander Sorors. If you're a Delta Sigma Theta, remember Delta Sigma Theta, you know about Dr. Sadie, first African-American woman to get a PhD in economics from the University of Pennsylvania. Second. Now, Sadie was an interesting lady. Another lady got hers the day before her. Sadie was not going to concede that. So she said among the first. She was not going to concede that she wasn't first. But when she got her doctorate, she could not find work. She went to North Carolina Mutual, which was a black-owned insurance company, and worked there. This is like saying you took a rocket science and put them at Safeway. She realized that she could not do what she loved doing. And how do I know she loved it? She turned her books over to Penn, first in the 60s, and then when she passed, she left them to Penn. You saw her buying economics books into the 70s. She passed in 89. So that was her first love. But she was a consummate professional, and so what she did was got a law degree. And she served on several government commissions. She was an amazing lady. Things have changed in higher education since then, kind of. Now you have faculty go to a campus as one African-American faculty member. My poor crazy mama taught at Ole Miss. Now, I don't know what was wrong with her, but she was from Mississippi. So she decided that the best revenge on Mississippi would be for her black hind parts to teach at Ole Miss. Every time we went to see her, it was amazing. I think the year after she was there, they hired a young African-American woman, but they had 3 taxis at Ole Miss, 3. And my hair was a bit longer and a little nappier, and I didn't own suits like this. So I went to Ole Miss to go to my mama's house, and they called her and said, there's an African here looking for you. Where is the African from? She said, I think that's my daughter. And she doesn't look like her. My mother said, she puts her hair back, puts on some decent clothes, she might. But we still have African Americans one to a department, lonely and isolated, and in fear of losing themselves. Like the young brothers and sisters said, in fear of losing themselves. In these colleges that are in the middle of nowhere, where they can go a month without seeing another black person. Now, white folks, you've never gone a month without seeing any white people, have you? Just thinking, just wondering. I wrote a book with a young white woman about 2000. It was called Unfinished Business, a Democrat-Republican take on the most important issues women face. I guess you know who the Democrat was. And both of our significant others had a nominator for her, cornbread and white bread. I was the cornbread. So my sorority, for example, and many other African-American women's organizations invited us to come do book talks and hang out. And poor Deborah would walk into these places petrified. And I said, Deborah, nobody's going to do anything to you. And she said, but I don't know if I should sit at the head table. I said, did they ask you to sit at the head table? She says, well, how do you feel when you walk into a room full of white people? I said, I went to MIT. I've been practicing this for a long time. So while we've come a long way, we haven't come so far in so many ways. People like Phyllis Wallace, W.B. Du Bois, who could not get the position of even assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He was called an assistant instructor. An assistant instructor, one of the most brilliant black men to walk the planet, could not get equivalency in the academy. Amazing. But these folks still spoke well of the academy. And one of the things, Tia, that y'all asked me to do, to envision what the ideal academy would look like. This is the academy the young African Americans, Latinos, Asians, GBLT folks want to have. They want to have an academy that's dynamic. They want an academy that is creative. They want to have an academy that is relevant. Now, forgive me, I have one hand, so I can hardly read my notes. How did I break my arm? I beat up a Tea Party person. And they still in the hospital. Actually, it was ice, but that sounded better. So we're looking at these academies that we want. We want academies that teach people the basics. And the basics are reading and writing and technology, but the basics also include audacity. The academy should teach people how to talk back. There should never be anyone in the academy that intimidates anybody else. There should never be anyone in the academy who is judged. I'll tell you one of my personal stories. I have a lot because I was interesting. But I went to Boston College undergrad. In San Francisco, I went to an academic high school, but unfortunately they put me out. So I don't know what I did, see what happened was. But anyway, they put me out. So my mom sent me to school in Mississippi. That didn't turn out right. It really didn't turn out right. So I said, can I go to college after the 11th grade? I don't think high school is for me. So they let me go to college. This was back in the day, 1970. They let you in if you walked in and said Ungawa Black Power. You know, they might let you in school. So I'm in freshman English. And this little lady, who was ABD at Harvard, assigned this story by Catherine Mansfield. If you're in English, you'll remember it, called The Garden Party. Now, see, I read that story in the 10th grade. So she said, write something about it. So I sat there and wrote something. Now, she watched me write it, but she told me I didn't. Now, everybody else turned in their own paper. So where did I get the paper from? So she sent me to the dean, and the dean said, are you sure you wrote this? I'm like, can you do a handwriting test? Or a lie detector test or something? The man said, I'm going to test you. So he put me in a room with a piece of paper. He said, write about dogs and cats. So I did. I wrote about how they were a luxury that Americans could not afford as long as there were hungry people on the streets. And the man had 2 dogs. Then I told my mama, who was worse than me, and she wrote them like a 10-page letter. I said, Mother, you didn't have anything to do, did you? They said, why did you admit my daughter? Did you think she was ignorant? She wrote an essay, are you accusing me of having it? She just wrote this long letter. But that woman made an assumption. Blessedly for Boston College, she was a 1-semester ABD. So she didn't get to stay. But those kind of assumptions basically make our young people feel as if they don't belong. I'll tell you another story. It's not about me. I went to Bennett College for Women because I have a sense of adventure. I didn't ever dream as a kid that I was going to be a college president. In fact, I don't know. I was in trouble at that place every day, every single day. I was in trouble for something. The board was calling me, did you call, one lady, honey, did you call Mr. Romney an idiot? I said, ma'am, that's within the realm of possibility. That's always my answer when I don't want to tell the truth. But in any way, I go to North Carolina, and a young lady from one of the majority schools in North Carolina calls me. And she says, I know you're an economist, I'm an econ major, would you mentor me? And I said, you go to one of the best schools in North Carolina. You don't need me for a mentor. Isn't there anybody else? And she said she was a senior and she had not connected with anybody who was willing to mentor her. So I told her, I said, come on down to Greensboro. We can chat, but I don't have time to mentor you. I said, I'll take you somewhere with me here and there, but you need to find somebody at your school. Well, lo and behold, when I looked at the list of professors there was a woman who had gone to graduate school with me. So I picked up the phone. I'm like, yo, sister. She's not a sister, but she could be the sister from the other planet. I said, yo, sister, I said, you have this student and she really needs mentorship. And she says, well, what do you want me to do? I said, mentor her. Very simple. She said, well, we've never connected. I said, did you give her an A-? I said, and you never connected? I said, did you ever speak to her? Did you ever invite her to a conference? And she said, I thought about it. I said, no, you didn't think. I said, now you know what I'm going to do for you? I said, I'm going to hang up the phone. I said, because I have not changed sufficiently since 1974 to have a civil conversation with you. I said, however, if I call you back in a month or so and you have not connected with my student, I said, we will have a conversation. I said, you know what's great about my job? Because everybody knows I don't like to drive. She said, what? I said, I have security and a car service. I said, so I can come right up there and have a chat with you, and I would not have to extend myself. She did pick the student up, but that kind of thing happens every day. And so we look at what we say about the ideal university. We want young people. We want young people to live in the life of the mind. But we cannot convince them that the life of the mind is worth it when other so-called bright people systematically ignore them. We've come a long way since Dr. Dorothy Irene Height was told at Columbia University, we already have a black person. We already have a black person. And so she went down to NYU where they admitted her. A long way from the day when the New England College of Medicine, which no longer exists, blessedly, had in their charter, annually we shall admit a Negress and a Jewess. Annually, we shall admit 1 and 1. So we've come some ways, but not that many ways enough. So when we talk about the ideal college or university, we're talking about a place that is replete with diversity. And I don't just mean racial diversity. I'm talking about, I'm talking about other gender diversity. I'm talking about the GBLT community, the Native American community, who also often get overlooked when we talk about diversity. But we stole their land. Well, the black people didn't steal it, but some of y'all's ancestors did. Now, let me be clear, I'm not accusing anybody in this room of having owned slaves. So therefore, I'm not asking you for my reparations yet. But we need them to close the wealth gap. You know, when I used to do a whole lot of TV before I went to Bennett, a man wrote me a letter. Actually, he emailed me. He said, your last name is Malveaux. My last name is Malveaux. I have a vineyard in France. I wrote back and said, could I get my reparations, please? I said, you know, if I can't get 40 acres and a mule, at least you can give me a few boxes of wine. Never heard from him again, ever. So we have some notion of what the ideal university looks like, but we also know that it doesn't look like that for everybody. And we have to be clear about that when we talk about diversity, is that different people have different experiences. And that's important to each one of us in this room, but in lots of other rooms, to make sure that everybody has a welcoming experience. How do you lose students at a university? Number one, you don't roll out the welcome mat. So the student comes, and like I said, they don't see another black person on the whole campus. Now, there may be some seniors on the other side of campus, but they don't see anybody who looks like them or has an affinity for them. They don't have to look like them, but has an affinity for them. They get there, and their first year experience is often horrible. The first year experience is so important for young people. That will shape their feelings about their university for the next 3 years. You want students to be excited and engaged. And if their first year experience is horrible, that's not going to happen. In fact, they'll be looking for a way to get out of there as soon as they can. So what do you do about this? Student services, my sisters over here, I was sitting with some women who told me they were student services. I was happy to hear that. But student services can make all the difference in the world. What's available? What can students do? Are there movie nights? Are there other nights? Do you reach out? If you see one or two African Americans walking by, or GBLT folks, or Latinos, did you ask them, did you know about the movie? Did you see it? One of the other ways that diversity is important is that we get to learn each other. Andy Young likes to tell a story about going to Howard University. No, he didn't go to Howard, somebody else did. But anyway, wherever he went, maybe he went to Xavier, there were a lot of Native African students at the college. He said he learned about Africa from them. And he went on to be ambassador to the United Nations because of that early experience. We had a white girl who came to Bennett. I told her, I said, you will never have to take a diversity class again in your life. But she came to Bennett and she had all kinds of experiences. Some of them I wouldn't repeat. Others involved things like microwaves or stoves in the dorm. Illegal. However, she told me, she said, I don't understand why my roommate likes to fry chicken. I said, well, ask her. I said, it's called, the yard bird. But in any case, she had all kinds of experiences sitting in student government meetings, where, as some of you know, meetings can get raucous. Other kinds of meetings. But in any case, what you saw was that kind of diversity. We learn from each other. We decide that other folks are going to be there. The world is not a narrow white occasion, and we shouldn't model that. And some of you who are in administrative positions, in student service positions, and others need to make that point to your administrators. Need to say, I'm not feeling this. What happened? Diversity has to include as well returning students, non-traditional women. There are challenges there often if they don't have the means to take care of babysitting. There are other challenges when you try to bring babysitting onto the campus. I got in trouble for that too. I mean, actually, I almost went to jail because they say that you can't have more than 6 children in a room, but I figured we could cut that corner. Not. The inspector came over, and they said, who's responsible for this? Everybody said, the president. You know? I'm like, oh, well. But in any case, we learn about other folks when we have those experiences. So the first way you lose students is when you don't roll out the welcome mat or target them. Now, targeting is a bad word. Since the first time President Obama said black without his jaw locking was with the Young Black Men's Initiative, we don't talk about targeting anymore. But we ought to. People who know they need something ought to be targeted. You know, if the unemployment rate in Appalachia was as high as it was in Black America, believe me, somebody would find a program for Appalachia. So, you know, philanthropy is not public policy. Philanthropy is lovely, but it is not public policy. So we have still some work to do with African American men, as the president mentions. The second way we lose students is through basically through what I call academic congruity. In other words, students may not fit in a class, and or they need supplemental programs, and or they have not connected with a faculty member, and or there's no study group or other organization for them to plug into. But for some reason, they don't feel academically at home. It's a lack of congruity that these students feel. All of it is not about skills. Sometimes it is, but it may simply be about engaging another student in what you're working on. And so faculty and staff can make a huge difference if they try to hook students up with others in the same position. The third way we lose students is through financial aid. And actually, we could call that the first way if we wanted to. And we talk about public policy. This administration and the previous administration and the previous administration have not taken the financial aid issue seriously. The switch in Parent Plus loans has caused many a student to drop out of school. And this is just evil. Because what it says, they used to judge you by your credit score. Now they judge you by whether you paid something late. Now, these are two different things. You could have a credit score of 720, but you could have paid something late. One little thing. Now, I always tell people when they ask me a policy, I say, Mama is going to send baby girl to school. She is going to pay that loan. She might be a little late on American Express, but she is going to pay that loan. And you look at somebody's record. You know, people don't pay their rent late because they don't want to sleep on the street. So did they pay their rent for 24 months? But the Parent Plus loan is nothing but a function, as I said, of evil. Basically, Clark Atlanta lost 500 students. And since much of our HBCUs are tuition driven, that caused them to have to lose faculty, that caused them to have to close programs and all that. Benedict College lost 300 students. My brother, one of my mentors, Dr. David Swinton, who leads Benedict, decided he was going to keep the students in school. He wouldn't send them down. Now, he had to do it later, but the semester where they changed the rules, he wouldn't send them home. That meant his books showed a negative. Now, any of y'all from the South have heard about Saks. There's some more evil people. No, that's not nice. Oh well. But my take on them is they don't like small schools. They don't like schools with small endowments, and they don't like HBCUs. There's this little rule that your endowment is supposed to be 4 times your budget. Oh well. A small HBCU is not going to have the 4 times budget. So when David decided to keep the students, he showed a negative on his balance, and then Saks came and put him on academic warning. Now, it should have been financial warning, but it's academic warning. So these policies not only are designed to marginalize students, but they're designed also to marginalize institutions. The Pell Grant has not been raised significantly in the past 10 years. The Pell Grant was designed to pay about half of your academic costs. Now it pays about a quarter of your academic costs, unless you are going to community college. So this Pell Grant that was designed to give low-income students significant financial aid does not do that. College presidents spend more of their time fundraising than doing anything else. You want to spend time with students, you want to hang out with alum, you want to get to know your community, you're walking around with a tin cup in your hand saying, please, baby, please, baby, please. And you know that you're doing it because you want your students to do well, and you know they can't do well if they don't have money. The work-study program has been cut significantly. This was one of the places where young people could raise money, get money. So the financial aid issue becomes one of the key ways we lose our students. We don't want students graduating with $30,000 and $40,000 worth of debt, especially when you know that the labor market is lagging. But if they want to finish, often that's what they end up having. This is politics, we need folks like you to politically go to this Congress and say, we need this. This is important. There was a mayor in DC once, I actually like her very much, but I think we didn't fall out, but we had words. She went to a meeting once and took her hand and slammed it on the table and said, I will do anything to keep the Redskins in Washington, D.C. Now, whatever she did, it didn't work, but I will do anything. I want to hear somebody bang their hand on the table and say, I will do anything to get these young people some education. Yeah. The fact is that we won't. We won't. And it breaks my heart that we won't. We all go to these places, I know you do, and they sing that song, The Greatest Love of All. I believe that children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty that they have inside. We sing the song, but we don't transmit that to our young people. And so President Obama says he wants the United States to lead the world in the number of people that have AA and BA degrees. And he wants it to happen by 2020. That's like 6 years from now. I hope the brother has some magic dust, because we haven't done anything else to get to that goal. Now, if we look at the people, how we lead the rest of the world, look at people who are 55 to 64. That would be those of us who, as the golfers would say, are in the back nine of our lives. I refuse to call myself middle-aged because I don't intend to live to be 120. I have no intent for that. Who's going to take care of me? My trifling nephews, who one time asked me what the street value of one of my patents was? I'm like, baby boy, you got to get out of here. But in any case, that group, 55 to 64, nearly 40% of us, 38%, have a BA or an AA degree. Now let's look at the group who's 25 to 34. It's the same, it's like 38%. It's the same number. What does that suggest? We have not improved the ways we deliver higher education in 30 years. Or maybe it suggests that as the demographic has changed, we have chosen not to produce the same quality as we have with higher education in 30 years. In just a 10-year period, Latino college attendance went from 3% to 13%. African American college attendance went from 9% to 14%. Asian college attendance went from 2% to 6%. The demographics are and white college attendance went down from 81% to 68%. The demographics are changing, but the professors are not, and they're trying to be safe. You've never heard before, until the demographics change, these people who are legislators saying they don't need to go to college. Why don't they just go to community college? I had one of these debates with one of these people. I said, well, where do your kids go? Just, my kids can go, but yours can't. So there is nothing wrong with community colleges. Many of them do what they're supposed to do. Many, if they have good transfer programs, provide students with an opportunity to stay at home and save a little money and then move on. But not many community colleges have that seamless relationship. And since they don't, these young people get lost. They slip between the cracks. And so when we look at some of these issues, we understand that education has not been a priority since the demographic changed. In states, we have seen appropriations to higher education cut. We've seen tuitions rise by double-digit numbers, and we've seen people marginalized. At some of the California colleges, you actually see the coursework being eliminated, so it will take you 5 years to get out of school instead of 4 because you couldn't get that one particular class. Now, the other way we lose students is that we don't give students enough ownership over their educational experience. We don't hear from them. We don't hear what they want. Now, they can't have everything they want, and that's real clear. I mean, there was some rapper that the young ladies wanted to bring to bed. I'm like, nah, y'all, we're not going there. One of those crotch-grabbing rappers. No. And they said, we voted on it. I said, oh, well. I said, I got the big vote, called veto. But so they can't have everything they want, but they ought to be able to have some of the things they want. They become disengaged when they keep hearing no, 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 no. We have to facilitate ways for them to be involved, whether it's student councils, we had a program one time we did president for a day. Of course, I took everything off my desk first. But actually, the young lady got to go to meetings with me, do a number of things like that. Make the student experience enviable. Make achievement enviable. So these young people say, this is what I want to do. And so we keep students. We don't lose them. One of my siblings, somebody in here is going to tell that I said it because she has a friend here. But Antoinette went to community college for 6 years. It's not that she's stupid. She has an MBA and all these other degrees. She just had too much fun. They let her be a peer counselor. They let her run student government. She said, what will the people do without me? I said, they'll survive. I said, I'm sure they will survive. But she had a good time at community college. So, but she was engaged. And the more people saw how competent she was, the more they came to her and said, Antoinette, how would you like to do this? I went to see one of her professors. I said, this girl needs to go to a college, like a real college, and finish up. I said, she has so many credits here, that she could be faculty. But you want somebody to do something like that at a 4-year institution. You want someone to be that excited at a 4-year institution. You want a young person not to be pushed into a for-profit college. That is one of the, if someone's here from a for-profit, I'm sorry, but those organizations, unless they're very carefully constructed, are pernicious. Young people do not get counseling. They have no student services. Essentially, they drop them there and say, do your thing. And they spend large amounts of money. They get a student loan. They don't graduate. They leave the semester because they can't finish, or they get a prerequisite that they just go spinning around with, and they look up and they owe tens of thousands of dollars, but they have no degree. As I said, I think that those places could be improved for real. But until they are, don't push your young people there. Don't let them come to your college and say, well, maybe you should go to, what do they call those places? I'm not going to call anybody's name out. I see they're recording over there. Oh, well, actually, I recalled enough names out that I'm already in trouble again. Oh, well. Our diversity also has to include, oh, no, that's not the page, the diversity page. I did the diversity page. See, I told you I can't read my own handwriting. One of the things we have to do is to lift up the liberal arts while at the same time making connections between the liberal arts and employment. I mean, everyone now is talking about STEM, 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 STEM. That's fine. But if you don't like STEM, If you can't do STEM, then it doesn't make sense to spend someone to spend. STEM, rather. I did very well in physics in high school, in the 11th grade, didn't get to 12th. But I refused to take biology. I don't like blood. If I see my own blood, I'm likely to pass out. I'm like, oh, that came out of me? So one of my physics teachers said, oh, you should go to med school. I'm like, really? That's like saying I should go to a padded cell, because that was not going to turn out right. So we have to let young people pursue their dreams and connect it with something that's practical. We need to also allow them in an academic structure to pursue their heritage and culture. Just because you're African American doesn't mean you know African American history. There's a legitimate way to have a Black Studies department. Just because you are Latino doesn't mean you know Cuban history. Maybe you know what's happening on one side of your community, but not the other. Academic departments that deal with ethnic and other issues have been denigrated. They have been cut. And this is yet another way to marginalize students. And so when we talk about diversity, when we talk about policy, we talk about making the college very comfortable. And we talk about rejecting privilege. The young people who come to college as first generation didn't have a mama or auntie or daddy who went to the college. Those legacy students come with a leg up. I'm not mad at them, but I would just say, do other students get the same opportunities that they do? What about study abroad? I had so many students who could not study abroad because they could not afford it. And yet, one might argue in a world of globalization that it's almost critical to get out of the United States. We don't understand in this country how privileged we are. Even if you are from the last ghetto, you are still privileged compared to other people in other parts of the world. The last time I went to Ghana, I had a brother. I can't tell you about the whole thing because it would take too long. But I had a driver guide, and we had a lot of fun. He was really cool. And the last day we were there, he invited us to his house. Well, his house was about 9 by 12. It was a tiny, what we call a room, where he and his wife and his 4 children slept. But the amazing thing is that we shared 1 can of Coca-Cola, because that was an honor. They didn't get Coca-Cola that often. They got it for their United States visitors. And I thought about how often we drink 2 sips out of a Coke and then leave it. Or how we go somewhere, and I'm guilty of that, so I don't drink Coke, I drink Diet Coke. Well, you better drink something that somebody gave you and be grateful. So we need to send our young people abroad. Why can't our campus administrators build a study abroad experience into tuition, room, and board? How come we can't do something like require students to at least spend a semester abroad or have one out of the country experience, even if it's just 2 or 3 weeks in the summer in a country? We have to get young people out of this country. Right now, the only ones who could do it are the ones who are privileged. We don't unpack privilege enough. We take it for granted. And when we take it for granted, we are bifurcating the educational experience for those who have and those who have not, even inside the same campus. And so it's really important to look at some of those issues and to say, how can we deal with this? We have so many blessings and so many possibilities, but we fail to explore them. Let me end by reading a poem by Dr. Maya Angelou. Now, let me say first that these young people are ours. That's what we can't forget. They're ours. If you're white and you don't see an African American student, Latino student, an Asian student, a GBLT student as yours, you are basically signing your own death warrant, because these are the people who will take care of us when we're getting Social Security. These are going to be, you want somebody to take care of you who you dissed, they might drop you when you're in the whole folks' home. And they might not drop you on purpose. It may just be like, I don't know, instinctive. So we may want to think about that when we're closing the door on young people. This is what Maya wrote, a pledge to rescue our youth. Young women, young men of color, we add our voices to the voices of your ancestors who speak to you over ancient seas and across impossible mountaintops. Come up from the gloom and national neglect you have already been paid for. Come out of the shadow of irrational prejudice. You owe no racial debt to history. The blood of our bodies and the prayers of our souls have bought you a future free of shame and bright beyond the telling of it. We pledge ourselves and our resource to seek for you clean and well-furnished schools, safe and non-threatening streets, employment that makes use of your talent but does not degrade your dignity. You are the best we have. You are all that we have. You are what we have become. We pledge you our whole hearts from this day forward. Thank you. I'm told we have Q&A. So if anybody, I think there are 2 mics. There's one. Where's the other one? I can't see. Okay. Q&A. Oh, y'all just want to go to the reception. Mm-hmm. No Q&A.
You had made a comment earlier that kind of sparked my interest because I'm from Georgia. I'm originally from Chicago, but I've been residing in Georgia for the past 10 to 12 years, and I worked for the technical college system for about 5 years, and I just transitioned to one of the university schools. And one of the things I noticed is what you talked about with legislators earlier. I remember one time I was in a situation where I was talking about the benefits of going to college, and I was overseeing the dual enrollment program, and it was a group of men, and they just felt like I should not be telling every student that they need to go to college. We actually came up with a campaign, Colleges for Everyone. There's a different type of college everybody could benefit from. And after that particular situation, one of the men came up to me who had basically attacked me in the audience and said that his child had taken 18 dual enrollment credit hours and he loved my program. And I just want to know, how do you address that when you have legislators who, in my opinion, in Georgia, when you look at the public school system, which is high minority, high poverty, and now they're talking about the benefits of everybody just going into the workforce with minimal education, and from my perspective, they're trying to almost create this caste system. Their kids are going to Ivy League schools, 4-year schools, and then now as the demographics are changing and basically minority, I feel like now they're saying, you don't really need to go to college, and they're basically making policies that support that mindset, and it doesn't harm the kids who are privileged because their parents are going to basically circumvent that, and they're going to be the ones guiding them. But a lot of times, other parents who are minorities, they don't have the resources or the knowledge to make sure their kids are going to pathways that are going to position them for long-term success and not just short-term employment. So how do you deal with that? Because that really bothers me when I hear that.
Well, the point has to be argued. It has to be argued essentially passionately and assertively. You do have a lot of legislators who don't believe that everyone should go to college. You have I don't even know how we got Parent Plus, but it basically marginalizes a lot of young people. One of the things that fascinates me when we look at some of the things that happen with education, some of these parents cannot, and it's not that they're ignorant or anything like that, it's that the FAFSA form is interesting. I think it used to have 110 questions. I think they cut them down, but who is going to fill out 110 questions? So that initially marginalizes young people. And please don't have an under-the-table income. Not to say that all people do, but please don't, because then you still have to fill out the FAFSA form, which IRS form and everything else, and that's untenable. So, but we have to argue the case. We need to look at our state legislators because so many of our colleges are state universities, and they have been cut badly, and they have often been pushed by legislators not only to raise the entry GPA, but also to raise tuition. So you get schools that, in private colleges, basically, you can almost do what you want if you're the president, almost. But at public colleges, you're constrained by these laws. And so we have to argue the point that college is important. Now, everybody may not want to go to college. And if you want to be a plumber, you make plenty of money. So many folks don't want to go to college. I've got a little nephew, he's in the Job Corps. He didn't even finish high school. He said it was boring. But he's in the Job Corps and he's studying to be an electrician. He will never miss a day of work. But when you tell me the high school is boring, go somewhere. You cannot stay in my brother's house if high school is boring. But the argument that has to be made is anybody who wants to not only go to college, go to graduate school, go to professional school, ought to have that opportunity. And we ought to also look at this whole issue with the sports players, because they're overwhelmingly African American. They have these scholarships that they lose if they're injured. They were injured playing for the darn school. They should be able to keep their scholarship for the whole 4 years in graduate school if they want it. But we have to make the case. That's the issue, is making the case and lobbying. And lobbying, which we know how to lobby for everything else. So let's figure out how we could be the NRA for education. I mean, the NRA is an expert at lobbying. I mean, anytime somebody says boo about guns, they're there. When people say boo about education, we ought to be there too. Thank you for the question, because it's a really important issue. Sir?
Do you have an opinion on what seems to be an emerging legislative trend where community colleges and state schools are receiving funding based on student success metrics rather than the actual population of the school?
I do have major concerns about the measures and matrices around student success, because I don't really know what they mean. In other words, who goes to a community college and how you're measuring their success? Is this someone who's going back to school after 20 years out? Is this someone who's just gone from high school? But we have moved into a metrics world. And this is, so when you measure, you can't measure the intangibles. And that becomes part of the problem. I think if someone goes to school for 2 years at a 4-year college or a 2, they may not finish, but their life has been changed materially. How do you measure that? So I would go back and look at the Department of Education and look at some of these metrics and look at what we're losing by taking everything and putting a number on it. They have not measured the intangible costs, the externalities, as economists would say. They've just measured the things they could put numbers around. This also hurts us in the place I call HBCU land, because students, I had a student who it took her 8 years to get her BA. Now, according to the Department of Education, that was a failure. But this woman, determined, came every fall and dropped out every spring to make money, and then came back every fall and dropped out every spring to make money. She didn't have any financial aid, she didn't have anything, but she was determined to finish her BA. She was 23 years old and she had a child that her mother-in-law took care of, but she managed to finish. She showed up as a failure for us. If you don't finish in 6 years, that's a failure.
This is an amazing conference. I constantly wonder, though, every time I go to a conference like this, is why aren't we talking about using LEAP goals and incorporating them in professional studies?
I think that the team at the conference would be better qualified to talk about than I am. But I think that those goals seem very useful and should be incorporated into study. This organization has had the foresight to essentially implement those goals, and the question is who will have the foresight to implement them. Tia, would you like to answer that? Okay, she said you could talk about it afterwards. Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I wanted to say first and foremost, thank you so much. You've inspired me to go back to the University of Wisconsin, which is kind of like the middle of nowhere. But I was wondering, because everything that you said, it was amazing. It's amazing how many things have changed, and that the fact that me and my friends can be at that university right now, but it's also more amazing how they stay the same. And it's really eye-opening to see how many things have stayed the same. However, I noticed like a lot of things have centered around race, and I know coming into my predominantly white university, I came in feeling very victimized. I came in feeling very weak as well, and I didn't find power until I heard privilege when it came in towards me, like my able-bodied privilege, the fact that I don't have to look at a ramp and think twice, or the fact that, I don't have to look at a pair of stairs and think twice, and the fact that I don't have to wonder about elevators or heterosexual privilege and things like that. And I also noticed the gap between diversity and integration, and the fact that you can put a whole bunch of people from different backgrounds together, but that doesn't mean they're actually having conversations. So I guess I noticed that things that bridge those things were the privileges I mentioned. So what my question to you would be is, how do you really bridge that gap between creating a diverse population and creating an integrated, just a population with a bunch of people who are together but aren't really having any conversations to create something that can foster a new understanding?
That's a great question, because it really is a great question, because you cannot force diversity. You can force, we need 2 Latinos, we need 2 this, and they're all sitting in the room, but you cannot force people to relate. But Dr. King said one time, the law may not make you love me, but it will keep you from lynching me. And I think that's the first step, is if everyone is in the room, you begin to see barriers lower. Right about now, though, many white people are feeling extremely threatened because of demographic shifts. And in feeling extremely threatened, many of them will close down. At some schools, they now have affirmative action for white men, because women are out enrolling men in undergraduate school. It's about 55-45. So at some schools, they just come out and say, we want to balance this class a little better. Now, I find that interesting. I just find it interesting. These are the people who basically eschewed affirmative action 10 years ago, and now they want some. And by the way, let me thank you, because when I talked about diversity, I didn't mention those who are differently abled, and I certainly should have. I'm going to blame it on my handwriting. Did I answer your question? I think so. Okay.
I just have a quick question about curriculum, and I don't know, one of the things you had said before is about the lack of change that we see in higher education, and it strikes me as someone who writes textbooks that I get crazy about what the content is in textbooks. And I know there's a big story around that, and Texas is where textbooks are made, and California, and the demographics around that. I don't know, I'm stuck on the curriculum thing, because it seems really hard to change from the inside if we keep talking about the same stories. I don't see as much change in the curriculum and in the content textbooks. Wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
There are 3 companies essentially that produce textbooks, and that's part of the problems. They don't have multiple companies that produce textbooks. So one of the things that needs to happen is that school boards need to be encouraged to develop, to subsidize certain kinds of textbooks. When I taught, we were Xeroxing all over the time. Because you wanted these pages from this and these pages from that. Now I understand that might be illegal. Whatever. But, it's difficult to find diversity in textbooks. When I was much smaller, I was small. I was like maybe in the 6th or 7th grade. They had 2 black people in my history book. One looked like a brother who had escaped from a Uncle Ben's rice box. And the other one was a sister with a head rag. I think that was Aunt Jemima's older sister. And those were the 2 black people they had in the whole textbook. The whole textbook. And my sisters wouldn't go to school that day because she said they would think that she was related to those people. well, I went to school. It didn't turn out right, but I went to school. I told somebody that they resembled one of those Irish people who came over at the bottom of the boat eating potatoes. That didn't go over too well. But I mean, that's an example. And when do we see ourselves then in these textbooks? And that's why things like African American studies are so important. But school boards basically approve these contracts for textbooks. And so although it's a slow process, it's sort of like showing up at school board meetings or running for the school board so that those questions can be raised. Sister?
Hi, thank you so much. I teach at an urban university in Richmond, Virginia, and we have a fairly diverse student population. Probably about 30 to 35% of our student population would be African American, Latinos, and Asian. And my question is, how do we get administrators and others to see that we also need that diversity in faculty and staff, because the faculty and staff in no way match the diversity of the student population, which we will see in many urban universities.
You know, there are two challenges there. One is that with faculty, people have tenure. And so one of the things that some colleges have done is required or not required, strongly persuaded, essentially departments to make new hires of people of color. But when people have tenure, they're not moving. I mean, they simply are not moving. Now, some other places will offer incentives for certain faculty to resign. I mean, if they're 75 or something, now that is age discrimination, but they may want a little money, and you can hook them up. But that is among the most difficult things. There's more turnover with staff, and so there are more opportunities there. But diversity experiences, not only on a campus, but also in a company, anywhere, come from the top down. The person who has to say that there's a commitment to diversity, frankly, is the president, because the buck stops here. If you give middle managers or faculty chairs the opportunity to claim diversity, they're not going to do it, because they don't have to. But if the president says, you have 3 openings in this department and like to see at least one be a person of color, it will happen. Because people want promotions, people want more money, people want trips. You know, I mean, academia gives you basically non-tangible goodies, which the president can give or take away. So that becomes one of the ways that you move folks. Sure.
Have you ever, or do you know of someone that has quantified the benefits of diversity in an institution?
There are a couple of folks who have done that kind of thing, and I have a colleague, Howard Ross. His company is called Cook Ross, and he's done a couple of things on that. So there are. Okay, the question was, did I know anybody who had quantified the benefits of diversity on universities and, I guess, corporations? And my answer was that I do have a colleague, Howard Ross. He's based in D.C. His company is named Cook Ross. I think also if you were able to reach out to Luke Visconti at Diversity Inc., he would probably have a good bead on who has been doing that kind of work.
Tia, AAC&U actually has published for years a journal called Diversity and Democracy, in which we've tried to gather the best research that we could find on the value of diversity, and it is absolutely a continuing to expand body of very robust research about the educational benefits of diverse learning environments. It continues to grow. Sylvia Hurtado, in addition to the other people that Julianne has mentioned, is doing, I think, the most interesting current research on it. But AAC&U tries to publish as much of that as possible. We have an older publication now, but one that still has a lot of research in it called Diversity Works, which you can still find on our website.
You know, there actually have been a couple of studies in corporate America that suggest that diverse workplaces yield higher profits, and diverse boards make a difference in profits.
All right, thank you so much for coming out and speaking to us. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it. Now, as a student, something that I kind of wonder about is what do I say to my peers to kind of inspire the same sort of passion about diversity? Now, I myself have been blessed to fall into with a great group of people who are really passionate about, their causes, but I recognize that a lot of the people in university are more than willing to just be kind of passengers in their own collegiate experience. So what would you say to them, especially students, to kind of inspire them towards this sort of cause?
I would ask them what kind of world they want to live in, because I think that really becomes the way that you inspire people to embrace diversity. What kind of world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a narrow, white occasion? Or do you want to live in a place that welcomes everybody? Because when we look 20 years down the pike, 30 years down the pike, whites are going to be a minority. It means we're all going to have to get along. The Latino population will be larger than the African American population. It's likely to be the dominant population. And so we're all going to have to learn how to get along. And that's, if you learn diversity, you're not going to be shocked when some of these things happen. And you can't live in denial. You simply can't. You see the numbers, you see what's going on. And so it's important for young people especially. I mean, what worries me the most when we talk about diversity and racism is when I see a 20-year-old or 25-year-old stuck there. When I see a real old person and they use the N-word and all that, I'm like, you're going to die. Yeah. I'm not wishing death on them, but I'm like, I don't have to worry about you. You're going to be up out of here in a minute. But when young people deal with that, that is what worries me, is that they have gotten stuck already. So I think if you engage the folks you're around with a basic question, what kind of world do you want to live in? And I think that some will be passionate about it and some won't, but many will be. I think Tia is standing here because it's time. Let me take this last question, and then I'm going to sit down.
Okay, thank you so much. I guess my question is related to the Hbcu community. Historically, the Hbcu community has been one that will embrace everyone, has been leaders in the education of people of color throughout our country. And at the same time, I feel like we're being threatened by some of the direction in terms of things like the Parent Plus loan situation, the changing demographic, having a large amount of first-generation college students that have to do, like you described with your student, take their time to get through. And at the same time, it seems that in the very near future will be penalized even more so based on the retention rate equation. So I guess my question to you is, how do we, as faculty and staff of the Hbcu community, make sure that our relevance is not only respected, but that our voice is counted in the conversation in terms of what needs to happen for sustaining these very relevant institutions?
HBCUs are under attack in any number of ways. In many states, there's pressure for them to merge. In many other states, the question is raised. Do we still really need HBCUs? And the answer is that there are 105 of us. We represent less than 2% of the whole number of colleges in the country. But we graduate more than 5% of the African Americans who get BA degrees. In addition, we graduate disproportionately the information science and computer science students. So if you do it on a per capita basis, we're graduating more. I think that HBCUs have to make their own case, and I've been disappointed that a lot of folks haven't. One of the problems with being a college president is that you get real quiet because you don't want to be penalized. If you talk ugly about Arnie Duncan, there are things you will not get unless you clown. But so you're basically balancing all these constituencies, and Congresswoman Marcia Fudge former president of Delta Sigma Theta. But Congresswoman Fudge had hearings about HBCUs. We could not get a president to come. I got on the phone and called people that I know. So in terms of, I'm President Emerita, and that's the only, there was another President Emerita, and we were the ones who were holding up the flag. So, but part of it is political. Just like we have to lobby for the opportunity to go to college, we have to lobby for the relevance of HBCUs. And again, the challenge is that even some African Americans don't think that HBCUs are relevant. And that's just a tragedy, because now I didn't go to a HBCU. I went to Boston College undergrad and MIT grad. I would have gone to an HBCU, but they kept asking me for my high school diploma, and I didn't have one. I mean, I was going to Howard, and they'd write me back, please send your high school diploma. I sent them right back, I don't have one. Then we went back and forth. So my mother said, you better go to Boston College or you'll be working at the post office. Now, black folks here will understand that. I always talk about there's always work at the post office. So I just could not fathom working at the post office. So I went to Boston College. But anyway, I think we have to fight for these colleges. We have to fight for these colleges. And we also have to understand that these colleges are some of the most diverse places you will go to. Our faculties are not exclusively African American. We have white faculty, Indian faculty, Latino faculty, and others. Some of us, many of us, have a contingent of white students. Now, they're not the majority, nor should they be, but they're a contingent of white students. Many of us have the dollars to bring in international students. So, and some international students can't come here for various reasons. I was able to admit, for example, 2 Haitian sisters after the earthquake, they didn't have any documentation. I'm like, just come on, y'all. So we were able to put them in a position to be able to transfer after they had a year's worth of credit. But we have more flexibility and just more utility, I think. And, you know, again, it's a lobby thing. We need to fight. Jim Clyburn from South Carolina has been one of our greatest champions. What is he, the whip, the number 3 person on the Dem side in Congress? He's been phenomenal in terms of lifting us up, but we have to support him. I want to thank you all very much, especially for the questions.
Well, thank you so much for keeping it real. You always do. Thank you so very much. We are going to go into our reception and our poster session right now. And I hope that, Dr. Malveaux, you're going to join us in the reception. Oh, wonderful. So she can still talk to some of you this evening. On your name badge at the registration desk, some of you have already put, I can see that. Hold that up, please. Stand there. Some tags that show your areas of interest. If you would go to the registration desk, if you haven't done so already, and please find some of the tags that identify your areas of interest that will help others who have similar interests connect with you. We have sign-up sheets for lunch and dinner groups. They're organized by areas of interest. They will be at the registration desk. And we hope that you join the conversation on Twitter at #DLSS14. So thank you for a wonderful evening. Dr. Malveaux, thank you so much for your comments, your straightforwardness. Thank you for your energy and inspiration. And to First Wave, I think they may have already left for the evening to get ready for tomorrow. Thank them for their just inspiration. That's all I can say about that. So please join us for the opening reception and the poster session in the Michigan Ballroom. Have a nice evening.